Have you ever wondered why strong, independent women often find themselves in relationships with emotionally unavailable or broken men? You know the type, the ones who can't commit, who struggle with addiction, or who just seem stuck in life no matter how much love and support they're given. If you've lived this pattern, or watched a friend go through it, you've probably heard the same old advice. You're too good for him, you need to set better boundaries, or why do you keep choosing these kinds of men? But here's the thing. If it were that simple, you would have fixed it by now. The truth is, this isn't just about picking the wrong partners or having loose boundaries. There's something deeper going on, an invisible psychological force that keeps drawing you back into the same dynamic. And to understand it, we need to talk about Carl Jung, the shadow, and the hidden parts of yourself you may not even realize are running the show. For years, psychology has tried to explain attraction through logic, compatibility, shared values, or even attachment styles. But anyone who's ever been caught in the push and pull of a toxic relationship knows, love doesn't always make sense. You might be a woman who's got her life together, ambitious, compassionate, emotionally aware. Yet again and again, you find yourself drawn to men who are emotionally closed off, stuck in their past, or unable to meet you halfway. The usual advice falls short because it assumes you're consciously choosing these men, when in reality, something far more primal is at work. This is where Carl Jung's concept of the shadow comes in. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, is the part of our psyche that contains everything we've repressed. Our insecurities, our vulnerabilities, our unmet needs, even our hidden power. We all have one, and here's the kicker. We're often drawn to people who express the very traits we've disowned in ourselves. So if you're a woman who prides herself on being strong and independent, chances are you've been taught to suppress your own need for support, your own moments of doubt, or even your own anger. And where does that suppressed energy go? It gets projected outward, onto the men who seem to carry those traits for you. That's why the chemistry with a broken man can feel so intoxicating. On some level, he embodies the parts of yourself you've been taught to ignore. Your nurturing side wants to heal him because, unconsciously, you're trying to heal the disowned softness in yourself. His avoidance mirrors your own fear of truly needing someone. His potential mirrors the parts of you that haven't fully stepped into their power. This isn't about blame, it's about recognition. Because once you see the pattern, you can finally break it. In this video, we're going to explore how shadow projection fuels these relationships, why the attraction feels so intense, even when it's painful, and most importantly, how to break the cycle by reclaiming the parts of yourself you've been giving away. This isn't about blaming strong women or shaming broken men. It's about understanding the unconscious forces that drive love and how to work with them, not against them. Because you don't have to abandon your strength to find a healthy relationship. You just need to meet the hidden parts of yourself that have been calling out for attention all along. We've all seen this dynamic play out, both in real life and in the stories we consume. Take someone like Whitney Houston, a woman of immense talent, strength, and generosity, who found herself entangled in a turbulent relationship with Bobby Brown, a man whose struggles with addiction and emotional instability were painfully public. On the surface, it made no sense. She was a global icon. He was spiraling. Yet the pull between them was undeniable, even destructive. Or consider the fictional power couple Olivia Pope and Fitz Grant from Scandal. Olivia, a brilliant crisis manager who could handle anything, yet repeatedly drawn back to a man whose emotional volatility and neediness mirrored everything she refused to acknowledge in herself. These aren't just random tragedies or plot twists. They're reflections of a psychological pattern that repeats itself in everyday relationships, far from the spotlight. So what does this dynamic actually look like in practice? The strong woman is often the backbone, the one who holds everything together. She's nurturing, sometimes to a fault, always ready to step in and fix problems, whether it's for her partner, her family, or her career. She's responsible, high-achieving, emotionally attuned, the kind of person others lean on. But beneath that competence is something less talked about, an unconscious belief that love is earned through service, that her worth is tied to how much she can endure or heal. Meanwhile, the broken man is often stuck in cycles of self-sabotage. He might be avoidant, pulling away the moment things get too real, or he might be stuck in past trauma, repeating the same mistakes while secretly waiting for someone to save him. He's emotionally distant not because he doesn't feel, but because he doesn't know how to face what he feels without crumbling. And here's the painful irony. The very traits that make her strong, her patience, her resilience, her ability to love unconditionally, are the same ones that keep her locked in a cycle with someone who can't truly meet her halfway. But this isn't about pointing fingers or reducing these relationships to a simple good woman, bad man narrative. The truth is, both people in this dynamic are playing out unconscious roles, each compensating for what the other lacks. She's drawn to his rawness because it mirrors the vulnerability she's buried under her competence. He's drawn to her strength because it reflects the stability he's never been able to claim for himself. It's not that she's too good for him or that he's using her. It's that they're each carrying a piece of the other's unhealed self. That's why no amount of surface-level advice, like just leave or be less needy, ever really works. The pull isn't logical, it's psychological. Until both recognize the hidden forces at play, the cycle will continue. This is why Jung's work is so crucial here. He understood that what we reject in ourselves doesn't disappear. It lurks in the shadows, shaping our attractions, our relationships, even our self-sabotage. The strong woman isn't choosing broken men despite her strength. She's choosing them because of it. Her unacknowledged need to be cared for, her repressed anger at always being the responsible one, her secret fear of being truly seen, all of it gets projected onto the man who seems to carry those traits for her. Meanwhile, his own disowned power, his ability to stand on his own, gets outsourced to her. They become two halves of a whole, but not in the romantic sense, in the sense of a puzzle neither can solve alone. The real tragedy isn't the relationship itself, but the missed opportunity for growth. Because when we keep chasing these imbalanced dynamics, what we're really avoiding is the work of integrating our own shadows. The strong woman doesn't need to stop being strong. She needs to reclaim the parts of herself she's been taught to abandon. The broken man doesn't need a savior. He needs to confront the wounds that keep him from being his own. And that's where the real work begins. At the heart of these toxic attractions lies one of Carl Jung's most profound psychological concepts, the shadow. The shadow represents all those disowned, rejected, and unconscious aspects of ourselves that we've pushed away, often because they didn't align with how we wanted to see ourselves or how we were taught to behave. It's not just our dark side, though it certainly includes our hidden anger, shame, and fears, but also our untapped potential, our silenced desires, and the parts of our personality we were conditioned to suppress. For the strong woman and the broken man, this shadow dynamic creates an unconscious dance of projection and longing that feels irresistibly magnetic, yet perpetually unsatisfying. The mechanism of projection explains much of this painful attraction. When the strong woman encounters a man who embodies vulnerability, neediness, or emotional turmoil, all qualities she has likely been conditioned to suppress in herself, she doesn't just see his pain, she unconsciously projects her own disowned fragility onto him. Her compulsion to nurture and fix him isn't just about him. It's a roundabout way of tending to the wounded parts of herself she's never been allowed to acknowledge. Meanwhile, the broken man gazes at her competence and resilience with a kind of awe, not just because he admires these traits, but because he's projecting his own latent strength onto her. What makes their connection so electrically charged is that each carries an unconscious blueprint of what the other has lost or abandoned within themselves. This creates what Jung called the mysterium conjunctionis, the alchemical attraction of opposites. The strong woman is unconsciously drawn to the broken man because he represents her exiled vulnerability, the permission to fall apart that she's never allowed herself. The broken man is drawn to her strength because it mirrors his own buried potential for resilience and self-possession. Their connection feels faded, intense, even transcendent at times because at an unconscious level, they recognize in each other the missing pieces of their own psyche. The tragedy is that instead of reclaiming these disowned parts, they remain stuck in a dynamic where she overfunctions to compensate for his underfunctioning, while he remains stuck in patterns that keep him dependent on her strength. Jungian analyst Robert Johnson described this perfectly when he wrote, "We mistakenly believe that the golden quality we seek in the other is to be found there, rather than in ourselves." The strong woman keeps trying to heal the broken man, not realizing that what she's really seeking is permission to acknowledge her own need for healing. The broken man keeps looking to her as his salvation, not recognizing that the strength he admires is actually his own potential waiting to be claimed. This projection game is so compelling precisely because it allows both parties to avoid the much harder work of true self-confrontation and integration. What makes this dynamic particularly insidious is how it masquerades as love while actually preventing real intimacy. The strong woman doesn't truly see the broken man. She sees her own disowned fragility. The broken man doesn't truly see the strong woman. He sees his own unrealized potential. Their relationship becomes a hall of mirrors where neither encounters the other's authentic self, nor their own. This explains why such relationships often feel simultaneously deeply connected yet strangely empty, because at core, they're based on mutual projection rather than genuine meeting. The path out of this labyrinth begins with shadow work, the courageous process of withdrawing these projections and reclaiming what we've disowned. For the strong woman, this means giving herself permission to need, to rest, to not always have it together. For the broken man, it means facing his avoidance patterns and stepping into his own agency. The most transformative relationships aren't those where two halves come together to make a whole, but where two whole people meet, each having done the work to integrate their own shadows. Only then can attraction be based on who someone actually is, rather than who we need them to be to compensate for our own unlived life. The intoxicating intensity of these relationships often stems from a cruel psychological trick. What feels like profound connection is actually the resonance of unresolved wounds. Like two puzzle pieces clicking into place, the strong woman and broken man fit together in a way that feels uncannily right, not because they're good for each other, but because their dysfunctions interlock perfectly. This is the chemistry of familiarity, not health. For the strong woman who learned early that love means self-sacrifice, being needed feels like purpose. For the broken man who equates intimacy with engulfment, her willingness to give without demanding reciprocity feels safe. Their bond is electric precisely because it replays childhood dynamics, the caretaker and the one who needs care, in adult clothing. The heart races not just with passion, but with recognition of an old, painful dance both partners know by heart. At the core of this intensity lies the rescuer-victim dynamic, a psychological tango where both parties play roles that ultimately keep them stuck. The strong woman finds meaning in being the rock, the healer, the one who holds everything together. In loving a broken man, she gets to prove her worthiness through endurance. If I love him enough, maybe he'll change. But this martyrdom comes at a steep cost, the slow erosion of her own needs, boundaries, and eventually her identity. Meanwhile, the broken man receives love without having to fully show up or confront his patterns. Her strength becomes his excuse to remain small. Her tolerance allows him to avoid accountability. The tragic irony? The more she gives, the more he withdraws, and the more he withdraws, the harder she chases. A vicious cycle that feels like passion but is actually mutual self-abandonment. Jung's concept of the golden shadow reveals why this dynamic is so hard to break. The broken man doesn't just represent the strong woman's repressed vulnerability, he embodies her golden shadow, the disowned parts of herself that actually hold the key to her wholeness. Her attraction to him is, at its core, a misplaced longing for her own untapped softness, her permission to be fragile. Similarly, when he gazes at her with a mix of awe and resentment, it's not just admiration, it's his soul recognizing his own buried power reflected back at him. This explains why these relationships often have a spiritual or fated quality, because at an unconscious level, both individuals sense they're encountering not just a partner, but a missing piece of themselves. The tragedy is that instead of reclaiming these golden shadows within themselves, they remain trapped in projection, each waiting for the other to change so they can feel complete. The intensity is further amplified by the push-pull rhythm that characterizes these relationships. When the broken man withdraws, it triggers the strong woman's fear of abandonment, a wound that makes his intermittent reinforcement all the more addictive. When she finally threatens to leave, his sudden vulnerability and promises of change activate her hope and compassion, creating a roller coaster of emotions that the brain interprets as love. This isn't connection, it's trauma bonding, where anxiety and relief alternate so dramatically that calm, stable affection begins to feel boring by comparison. The biochemical cocktail of cortisol and dopamine creates an addiction-like attachment, making it extraordinarily difficult to walk away even when the relationship is clearly destructive. What makes this attraction particularly heartbreaking is that it contains seeds of genuine growth, but in distorted form. The strong woman's capacity to love deeply isn't the problem. It's her belief that love requires her to disappear. The broken man's sensitivity and depth aren't flaws. They're strengths he's turned against himself. In healthier dynamics, these very qualities could create profound intimacy. But until both partners stop using each other as repositories for their disowned selves, the relationship remains a prison disguised as salvation, intense not because it's true love, but because it's a magnifying glass held to their deepest wounds and greatest unlived potentials. The way out isn't to kill the longing, but to redirect it inward, to become for ourselves what we've been seeking in each other. The journey toward breaking this painful but familiar cycle begins with the most crucial step of all, awareness. Many strong women spend years caught in these dynamics without realizing they're repeating a pattern, mistaking intensity for intimacy and endurance for love. The moment of awakening often comes through a painful realization, perhaps after the third or fourth nearly identical relationship, or when friends point out the obvious pattern she's been blind to. Developing this awareness requires courageous self-honesty, whether through journaling to track relational patterns, therapy to uncover their roots, or simply reflecting on past relationships with new eyes. The key question isn't, why do I keep choosing broken men? But rather, what part of myself do I encounter in these relationships that I haven't made peace with? This shift from blame to curiosity creates the foundation for real change. Owning one's shadow is where the true transformation begins. For the strong woman, this means asking herself uncomfortable questions. Where have I equated being needed with being loved? How have I used my competence as armor against vulnerability? When did I learn that my worth depends on how much I can endure? She must examine where she's been suppressing her own need for support, how she's made herself responsible for others' emotional well-being while neglecting her own. Simultaneously, the broken man, if he's to grow, must confront his avoidance patterns. Where have I used my wounds as excuses? How have I expected others to carry emotional burdens I refuse to shoulder? What parts of my power have I disowned and projected onto others? This stage isn't about self-flagellation but about reclaiming wholeness, gathering up the scattered pieces of oneself that have been lost through years of projection and self-abandonment. Setting boundaries marks the turning point where insight becomes action. For the strong woman, this means learning the difference between compassion and codependence, between loving someone and losing herself in the process. Healthy boundaries aren't walls to keep people out but gates that say, "You may enter, but not at the cost of my self-respect." This might look like refusing to engage in endless emotional rescuing, or no longer tolerating hot and cold behavior under the guise of "he's just damaged." Crucially, these boundaries aren't established to force the broken man to change. That would just be another version of the control pattern, but to stop enabling dysfunction while reclaiming one's own life. The paradox is that by setting these boundaries, she actually creates the conditions where real intimacy could flourish, if both parties are willing to do their work. The final and most liberating step is shifting from a rescuer mentality to attracting wholeness. This requires fundamentally changing one's definition of love, from "I love you because I can heal you" to "I love you because you're already whole." The strong woman must examine her attraction patterns. Does she lose interest in emotionally available men because their stability feels unfamiliar? Does she mistake anxiety for passion? This shift isn't about lowering standards but raising them, seeking partners who are doing their own shadow work rather than those who need her to complete them. In practical terms, this means developing the capacity to be drawn to quiet consistency rather than dramatic intensity, to mutual growth rather than one-sided salvation. True integration happens when the strong woman can embrace her vulnerability without losing her strength, and when the broken man can claim his power without fearing it will isolate him. The goal isn't to reverse roles but to transcend them, to become individuals who no longer need these polarized dynamics to feel connection. When both partners take responsibility for their own shadows, their relationship stops being a hiding place and becomes fertile ground for genuine growth. The love that emerges from this integration may lack the dizzying highs of the old pattern, but it offers something far more precious: the quiet, steady joy of being seen and loved for who you truly are, shadows and all. This journey from projection to wholeness is neither linear nor easy. There will be moments of backsliding, times when the old patterns feel more comfortable than the new unfamiliar territory of balanced relationships. But each small act of self-reclamation builds upon the last. Eventually, what once felt like magnetic attraction to brokenness begins to feel foreign, while the once boring prospect of an equal partnership starts to feel like coming home. The greatest love story isn't the one we live with another, but the one where we finally make peace with all the disowned parts of ourselves, where we stop seeking in others what we've learned to cherish within. What we've uncovered here is more than just another theory about toxic relationships. It's a profound invitation to self-discovery. The attraction between strong women and broken men isn't random chemistry or bad luck. It's a mirror held up to the parts of ourselves we've been too afraid, too ashamed, or too conditioned to acknowledge. These painful patterns are, at their core, a call to stop searching for wholeness in another person and instead undertake the sacred work of reclaiming the fragments of ourselves we've left behind. You don't have to abandon your strength to find love. You simply need to stop outsourcing your vulnerability. You don't have to fix anyone else's brokenness to prove your worth. You only need to embrace your own complexity, shadows and all. The healthiest love isn't born from completion, but from wholeness, from two people who have done the work to show up as their full selves, without expecting their partner to carry what they refuse to face. This is how we break the cycle, not by finding the right person, but by becoming the integrated version of ourselves who naturally attracts healthier love. The journey won't always be easy, shadow work rarely is, but it's the only path to relationships that nourish rather than deplete, that inspire growth rather than repetition. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you experienced this dynamic in your own relationships? Can you recognize moments where you've projected your shadow or absorbed someone else's? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else feel less alone in their struggle. If this exploration of psychology and relationships resonated with you, consider subscribing for more content that goes beyond surface-level advice and digs into the deeper patterns that shape our connections. For those ready to dive deeper into this work, I highly two transformative books: Carl Jung's The Shadow, for a foundational understanding of these hidden parts of ourselves, and Robert Johnson's Romantic Love and the Shadow, which explores how these dynamics play out in our closest relationships. Remember, the most important relationship you'll ever heal is the one you have with yourself. When you stop running from your shadows, you'll find they were never monsters, just unclaimed parts of you waiting to be brought into the light.